Before we get into Grimnir's specific changes, we do have to make mention that he is one of the characters most affected by the change in scaling to while rising jump normals in the patch. He's a character that likes to set the opponent down in the corner and then go for a high-low fuzzy mix-up that uses a while rising overhead. With now those combos doing less damage overall, he's effectively a little bit nerfed for it. It's just a demonstration of his ability to fuzzy the opponent from an overhead jump in. Grimnir's first change is to his far-standing heavy. The first attack has been a great part of his kit. It's 8 frames startup and had 5 active frames beforehand. This made it great for pokes in neutral where he would be able to catch and contest the enemy. His far-standing heavy lost 3 active frames towards the end of the move, so while the first attack still starts up in 8 frames, it now lost half of its overall duration. As you can see, it's still a great normal that's able to punch out some other normals. But with the reduction in active frames, the window is cut in half for it, so it's going to be a little more difficult for Grimnir to make use of this tool. It's still his best button by far, though. The range and travel speed of his dash medium and dash heavy have been increased. This is what the dash medium looked like before. And this was his dash heavy. This is what his dashing medium looks like now. It's a noticeable difference, and he appreciates being able to threaten overhead from farther away, but also being able to use this in conjunction with Dancing Storm to go for overhead mix-ups from greater distances than before. This is his dashing heavy now. While he doesn't really get much of a confirm off of this one, it is still a big norm that he can throw out, and I guess he'll appreciate being able to threaten with it at some times. I still don't see it being used as much, though, as Dash M at least has mix-up utility, and 6XL is, well, 6XL. The appearance of his Dancing Storm has been adjusted for a quality of life change. Before, this was the color scheme of the Fireball. This is what it looks like now. There's this new extra pink color into it, and that pink color serves a function. While that Fireball is pink, you're able to use the wind shift follow-ups to change its behavior. Once that pink color is gone, you are no longer able to use wind shift. You can see towards the end of the Fireball how it disappears. This is a better shot of that. There's no functional change at all to Dancing Storm with this new change. It's simply a quality of life change that will let new players know how long they have to cancel into wind shift, and also let a player, upon watching a VOD, know if a wind shift input was valid or not in some situations. His medium Fireball Dancing Storm has extra active frames in the new patch now. Before, it was simply a Fireball that was slower than his light version, but barely had any more range than it. The second one was his medium version. This is how his two versions compare now. As you can see, the medium version with its extra 5 active frames goes considerably farther now. This is a nice little change for Grimnir's neutral. The ultimate version of Dancing Storm sees a couple of buffs to its startup and its travel speed. This is what it looked like before. With 16 frame startups, it would take about 37 to 39 frames from full screen to connect with the opponent. A very slow ultimate Fireball. With its startup frames reduced from 16 to 11 and its travel speed increased, you can check out how fast it is now. It takes 23 frames now to travel from full screen and hit the opponent. This is really good for him. It's also really good because he's able to convert off of this with an ultimate Deathrite Tempest. And that leads to plenty of damage, albeit scaled due to the system mechanic changes. But still, Grimnir appreciates having a full Fireball threat when he has enough SBA gauge now. The medium version of his Winds of Temptation, an anti-air move for him, has seen a couple of buffs. While it functioned as an anti-air, it really didn't give much of an opportunity to capitalize on it. The opponent was knocked all the way back to full screen, and you basically had no window to capitalize on this hit. There's an extra 10 frames of hit stun now, so going up from 30 frames to 40 frames, and the lateral knockback and height have been reduced to make it so that the opponent falls pretty much straight down from the hit point. As you can see, you're able to link a 5L off of this hit. Grimnir isn't one who's lacking in terms of anti-airs. However, his 2H is very vertical, and so there's sometimes a dead area right in front of Grimnir at that vertical angle that he can't contest. Now, at the very least, if he's able to use Winds of Temptation, he'll be able to get some reward for it. Keep in mind, though, that this move does lack iframe, so depending on the situation, the opponent could still stuff your attempt to anti-air him with this. That's just a couple of potential situations that do happen based on when you do the input. All versions of Grimnir's Deathrite Tempest had their hurt box expanded upwards during active frames, I assume to make it easier for the opponent to hit it with a falling normal. That being said, in my testing, I haven't been able to notice anything that different. This is probably a change that was more appreciated by a hitbox viewer. The light version of Deathrite Tempest no longer immediately recovers after hit. Before, you pretty much always had this knockdown in situation. -22 no matter what range there was. Additionally, the opponent was pretty close. Close enough for a 6XL to reach. Now, Grimnir's frame advantage varies based on where this move hits. At point blank range, he gets a +14 situation. When it's spaced out, he gets +20 frames. You'll also know that the opponent is significantly farther away on all hits. At point blank range, it's basically within 6XL range. However, at maximum range, you now are no longer in 6XL range. All this effectively means for light Deathrite Tempest is that it's not as great of a poke as it once was before. When he's able to use this in combos for a short knockdown, he's with the range to get a meaty 6XL, so I don't think he's hurting too much from this change. In contrast, medium Deathrite Tempest sees some changes to recovery that are buffs. The recovery's been shortened by 3 frames. At point blank, this used to be -10. And now it's only -7. So when you're able to space out this version of the move, you're significantly safer than you were before. One last bit of tech I wanted to share here was the changes to medium Deathrite Tempest actually make it so that if with the right setups, you're actually able to space it out against an opponent's wake-up option and have it be plus, something that the patch notes overall writing shares. Al Ricker here is going to demonstrate these options for you with notes right here for how to set them up. We can see that Grimnir can be +1 or +4 depending on your execution timing with these things. Again, if you're able to time these out manually, or if you're able to find out the auto-timed one, then you're going to be in pretty good shape with him to maintain his offense in mid-screen after throws. This is nice for him. I wonder if Grimnirs will prefer to combo into this version of Deathrite Tempest for the knockdown. You're a +28 here, which is double the frame advantage that you had off of the light version as well. So, I'm curious to see if this will have any sort of change to Grimnir. The heavy version of Deathrite Tempest had varying frame data depending on where he used it and made the opponent block. At maximum range, it could be -6 and spaced out, so potentially safe depending on the matchup. At point blank, it was -13 and therefore highly punishable. Now, it behaves consistently on block regardless of range. At point blank, you're -8. And spaced out, you are -8 as well. I don't see this as being in too considerable a nerf, as largely Grimnir used this near the corner in his combos to get the extensions, and not really that much of a neutral tool, so I'm not sure why they made this change to it, but it's there now, and I can appreciate a move behaving consistently. The ultimate version of Deathrite Tempest had its pushback on block reduced. Now you're within close medium range for some characters, and this was the pushback before. As you can see, Gran was pushed out to far medium range, so he wasn't able to get a punish with his 6-frame close medium. So Grimnir should be eating more medium punishes for this move being blocked now. The heavy version of his Wind Crest has its cooldown increased. Before, it would be on cooldown for 8 seconds. Now, it goes on cooldown for 10 seconds. This is a nerf, but I'm not sure how substantial it is. 2 seconds is a long time in a fighting game, and it could also have implications where Grimnir is not able to loop his offense with these seals in the corner as much as he'd like to, and then he's forced to invest his SBA gauge in order to use the ultimate version to get out the seals for him to then force his high-low fuzzy mix-ups. Still, we'll see how it is. I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal for him, though. The ground version of Ultimate Windcrest has seen a few changes. It's worse on block, but it's better on hit now. Before it was -4, and now it's -6 on block. Basically, instead of being safe, it's now punishable. On hit, he'll see improved combo damage routing. Before, he couldn't link a close heavy. And now, he can chain that close heavy. So it's a small improvement to the damage he can get from this move. The air version of Ultimate Windcrest also sees a couple of changes. The recovery after landing was increased by 6 frames. There's changes to the launch height, the block stun has been decreased, and the hit stop has been increased. All in all, I don't think this functionally changes anything about the move, except if you try to throw it on neutral, you might be more susceptible to being punished. Here's what it looked like on Whiff before. This is what it looks like now. -54. A small difference, but ultimately, I'd argue a negligible one, because most Grimnirs aren't going to be doing this raw and neutral like this. They're going to be doing it in the corner. The patch notes themselves explicitly stated that they made sure that, despite the recovery changes, all other properties were adjusted to make sure that Grimnir had access to the same extensions and setups that he did before.
Excellent.
You're +70 here in the old patch, too. The last adjustments for Grimnir are to his Gale Dash. The mid-air hit stun has been largely unified at 30 frames for almost all directions. When he goes straight up, it's still at 35 frames of hit stun. However, the diagonals used to be at 28 frames. But now they've been normalized to 30 frames, and most of all the other ones had 20 frames of hit stun, but now have 30 as well. Basically, this just means that Grimnir's combos and the ability to convert from these hits are largely going to be the same no matter what version it is, with the exception of the up version. Additionally, there's been input buffering added on so that you can buffer jumping attacks and aerial skills immediately after using Gale Dash. But there's one more important buff to go over. Before, if he hit a grounded opponent with the forward or back versions of his Gale Dash, they'd be launched. While he could combo from this, he was immediately building up combo limit with the aerial hits, reducing his overall potential damage. Now, if he hits a grounded opponent, they'll stay on the ground. This gives him access to his entire ground combo library against these opponents when he uses to approach from neutral or as part of a mix-up tool, I suppose. Now, due to all the property changes going around with Gale Dash, as well as some of the changes to Windcrest's data, namely the ultimate one, there's going to be some differences in how you're going to have to route with Grimnir in order to get the same safe jumps that you wanted before. Reporting here is Grim Flash, who mentions that the old auto-time fuzzy route doesn't work in the current patch, but they have a new one to use, and it's actually better than the old one as you're able to safe jump ultimate DPs with it. So, have a look here.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's a good bit of tech to have. Hama here reports another variant of a corner combo that's going to loop the fuzzy and reportedly does more damage than the previous versions. There's a couple of good things to note here, namely the fact that despite the increase in cooldown on a heavy Windcrest, we're able to use it on back-to-back knockdowns with these routes. Keep that in mind. It's still early on in this patch's life cycle, so I imagine that there are various people who haven't gotten around to posting their new tech with Grimnir onto Twitter as it is for us to scope out. There's also a little bit of a frustrating element where dustloop.com lists Grimnir's hashtag as _GR, when that's Graham's currently existing hashtag. The one I've been able to find the Grimnir tech on Twitter with is _GM. So let's get on that Dustloop and update that, eh? Grimnir sees a couple of spot nerfs here and there, as well as a character who will feel some of the nerfs to the ultimate system mechanic changes, as he has some great moves for him, and a couple that have just gotten even better. Still, the changes to his Gale Dash, making it so that's far more rewarding on hit, allows him to play around with that. And despite the changes to his current routes and Okizeme timings due to the nerfs to Wind Crest, he's still going to be able to come up with new routes and setups, as we're already seeing, where he's going to be able to loop his fuzzy mix-ups in the corner as well. I feel like Grimnir's largely going to play the same as the last patch, with a couple of adjustments, as well as with a few new tools to play with as well. So maybe he's slightly better than before.